And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session where you can raise questions, and you're also invited to post your question in the chat if you wish in advance of the Q&A session, so the Secretariat can organize and on how to answer your questions and then facilitate the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. So starting on the Gender Action Plan and how it was adopted in by COP5 and welcomed by COP5. Starting from COP3 in 2019, it was decided that gender was to be included as a focus area on the convention's work program and work and budget for the biennium 2020-2021. And this is where the process of developing a plan on gender started. At the next COP, at COP4, there was the first decision adopted by COP on gender mainstreaming. That was decision MC4/10, which took note of the gender roadmap that had been developed by the Secretariat and invited parties to support the Secretariat in its efforts to mainstream gender into all activities to be undertaken by the Secretariat, as well as parties and other stakeholders, included through the development of a gender action plan for the 2022-2023 biennium to be developed during that biennium. And then finally, as I mentioned during COP5, which was held in November 2023, our last COP, the COP adopted decision MC5/15, which welcomed the Gender Action Plan and also invited parties and the Secretariat to develop a list of priority activities under the Gender Action Plan. And this is the purpose of this webinar today, is to report on progress made by the Secretariat and by parties in implementing these priority activities during the 2024 and 2025 biennium. So in general, the Gender Action Plan, which was adopted by COP5, as I mentioned, provides an overall plan which is a comprehensive blueprint for actions to promote gender equality within all activities under the purview of the Convention. The plan is organized around actions proposed for the Secretariat, but also for parties and other stakeholders. And as I mentioned earlier, the COP5 decision also identified a list of priority activities to be undertaken during the current biennium. So the Gender Action Plan provides guidance on possible actions, including targets and indicators of progress to promote gender equality and mainstreaming gender within the Secretariat, and also in all activities undertaken by parties, partners, and other stakeholders. The Gender Action Plan also provides guidance on how to translate equality and diversity principles into specific actions. And here you have a picture of the Gender Action Plan publication that is now available on our website, and also other supporting communication material has been developed to raise awareness on the Gender Action Plan. And this is also available on our website and has been done thanks to the general contribution of Sweden. So here is our publication on the gender priorities for this biennium 2024-2025. You see they are listed here. First, activities to be carried out by the Secretariat, and then a similar list for activities to be carried out by parties. I will come back to each of these activities throughout the presentation, but I will just wanted to give you an overview of what are the activities that are listed. And you can find this publication with all listed priorities also on our convention's website. So starting with the first priority activity, as you can see at the top of the slide, you see the priority activity for the Secretariat, and often there is a corresponding activity to be carried out by parties. So in this case, we have the review of the national reports. And I will hand over to my colleague Richard to give you an overview of the preliminary findings of this review. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Lara, and good day and good evening to everyone. I'm Richard Gutierrez. I'm the Program Management Officer for National Reporting. As Lara mentioned, I'll be presenting to you today the preliminary findings on the Gender Action Plan as it pertains to the review according to gender considerations of national reports, particularly submitted by parties under Article 21 to identify measures related to the control of mercury-added products used primarily by women and children, such as cosmetics and dental amalgam. Now, may I direct your attention to the left part of your screen, where it is indicated preliminary findings. On that part of your screen, you will see the preliminary findings for the three reports. Let me go through first the findings on the second short national reports, where it is indicated that one party mentioned gender in the context of establishing gender sensitivity exposure and guidelines for production processes that uses mercury. Our preliminary findings for the first full reports show that 5 parties mentioned gender in the context of the NAPs or training programs, while there were 26 parties that mentioned women on the issue of dental amalgam policies, advisory for fish consumption, ASGM, etc. And then you will note that the first short national reports, there appears to be no reported instances where parties mention gender or women. To your right, you will see that the presentation. So sorry, I just saw in the chat that the presentation is not appearing for some of the. Well, I hope you can catch this later. But let me quickly say that to the right of the slide, you will see the pie chart representing the data. Now, a couple of quick notes. So first of all, this is just a preliminary finding of the work we're doing in the Secretariat. So this data comes up in terms of only for the English searches. We are still in the process of checking all of the external links. But one thing to note is that, as you will see from the data presented, the mention of either women or gender appears very selectively, particularly on the issue of dental amalgam, ASGM, research information, information sharing, etc. So it's not showing that it means that in not all of the questions you have the issue of gender. So this is only very selective in terms of where it appears. The other thing to note with regard to the preliminary finding is that, as I've mentioned, there are 0 responses or 0 instances in the first short reports. One thing to take note of is that the term women was added during the reporting format when added measures were added to dental amalgam under decision MC4/3. And this is why you can see in the first full report, there is more mention of women and also in relation to dental amalgam appearing in the first full reports. Take note, for those of you who are listening and not familiar with the national reporting cycles, the first full report contains 43 questions, which cover Article 4. The short reports cover only 4 questions, and it does not cover Article 4. So that's why in the second short reports, you will only find 1 mention of gender for that reporting cycle. And then lastly, if you're also interested, children are mentioned as well, together with women, and similar to women, you find the mention of children in only specific topics, dental amalgam, advisories, etc. That concludes my presentation on national reports. I pass the floor now to the next speaker on national action plans.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I understand some are experiencing some technical issues with viewing the slides. So we are working on that, and I hope it's not everyone who is unable to see the presentation as we can see it on our end. I will continue with the next slide on national action plans. So the second priority activities that is listed in relation to the COP5 decision on implementing the gender action plan is a review of gender elements in existing national action plans submitted by parties pursuant to subparagraph 3A of Article 7 on artisanal and small-scale gold mining to establish a baseline for future reviews of national action plans in collaboration with the Chemicals and Health branch of UNEP. And there is a corresponding activity identified as a priority for parties, which is to incorporate gender elements into the review of national action plans to be submitted in accordance with Article 7 and Annex C to the Convention. So the Secretariat undertook a review of the 37 national action plans on ASGM that were received so far, and they are available on the website of the convention. You can see a link here in the slide where you can find all national action plans submitted so far by parties, and all the documentation is there. It is to be, I would like to highlight that in accordance with the Annex C to the Convention, national action plans are to include strategies to prevent the exposure of vulnerable populations, particularly children and women of childbearing age, especially pregnant women, to mercury used in ASGM. So this is a requirement to be included in the national action plans, and this is one of the elements that has been reviewed as we went through the national action plans for this exercise. So the objective of this review was to develop a baseline assessment and to understand to the extent to which gender consideration have already been integrated in the submitted national action plans, and so that we could establish a baseline of where we are now, with the idea that this would be helpful to inform parties on the recommended steps to be undertaken during their upcoming review of their national action plans. So in accordance to Article 7, parties are to review their implementation of Article 7, including their national action plans every 3 years. And for some of these national action plans that have been submitted, the review is upcoming in the next intersessional period. And so also this review could also generate, the hope is that it can generate some data to guide the development of guidance on how to conduct this review of implementation of Article 7. So in the next couple of slides, I will introduce an overview of what the review contains, and also some initial findings. So in particular, the review went through information provided in the submitting NAPs, which regarded mercury exposure and impact, as some parties identified this or provided this information in the National Action Plan. Also, with regard to socioeconomic factors that influence women's participation in the sector, information on gender integration in the regulatory framework, but also women's participation in the ASGM sector, and the gender differentiated roles and participation in the sector. The Secretariat found information on gender-inclusive stakeholder consultation and also on women's empowerment towards mercury-free transition. So we have compiled the information that we found in the National Action Plans. You see here some graphs on these issues, and this is an important source of information provided by parties that contextualize also the environment where the National Action Plan will be put into, will be implemented. And then after this analysis of the context, the review also offers a more detailed analysis of gender objective settings and stakeholder involvement in the development of the National Action Plan, but also whether parties have identified gender indicators and targets within the plan, if gender considerations are integrated in the monitoring and evaluation of the plan, if there is a budget dedicated for gender in the plan, and if there is a gender policy development and enforcement as implementation of the plan takes place, and then identify some good practices and emerging trends and also gaps in the development of the national action plan so far. And then finally provides some key areas where for review, also in light of the upcoming review of implementation of Article 7 for some parties. Here I give the floor to my colleague Irene, who will now present you a status of implementation of our next priority activity. Over to you, Irene.
Thank you very much, Lara. And good day to all our participants. My name is Irana Rizza, and I'm the Associate Expert at the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention, working mainly on the specific international program that we call the SIP. And as Lara mentioned, I will present one of the priority activities for the biennium 2024-2025 of the Gender Action Plan. And this is the development of case studies on the gender dimensions of the projects of the specific international program. So gender dimensions of SIP projects. So as you can see in the slide, this is one of the projects we have identified as a case study, but I will give you, before I jump into the projects, a little bit more of context. For this activity, the Secretariat has prepared a report. We have identified 3 case studies among the projects of the first and the second rounds of the specific international program that have been completed. And we have carried out an analysis that looks at how each of the 3 projects presented as case studies have factored gender elements into project design in the first place. And this has been done by studying the submitted proposal and the legal agreements. Then how gender considerations have been taken into account during project implementation. And for this, we have carried out the analysis of the interim project reports that have been submitted by the project partners. And lastly, we have looked at how gender considerations have been included in final reporting. The report prepared by the Secretariat has also considered the findings and conclusions that emerged from the terminal evaluations when these are available. So here on the slide, you can see a snapshot of the first project we have presented as a case study. This is the project in Argentina. It's titled Capacity Building Program for the Implementation of the Minamata Convention. And this project was approved and implemented under the first round of the SIP. It was implemented by the National Institute of Industrial Technology through the Basel Convention Regional Center for Training and Technology Transfer for South America. And it was implemented between August 2019 and December 2021 with a total SIP budget of $250,000. So the project focused on improving the management framework of mercury added products and their wastes, and on improving the technical capacity at the national and subnational levels to implement Article 4 of the Minamata Convention on mercury added products. And the project also developed and improved the laboratory in Argentina and implemented a mercury surveillance unit to address the lack of monitoring capacity. Additional information about the project can be seen in a fact sheet that the Secretariat has prepared about it, and there's a link on the slide that you can use to access the fact sheet. Now, coming to the gender elements in these specific projects, we found that Argentina included gender considerations in the project application. In fact, the country acknowledged in the project proposal that mothers and pregnant women constitute an important group to engage in awareness raising and information campaigns, and adopted a gender approach in the implementation of these campaigns, but also in the planning of training and capacity building activities. Then Argentina also included gender-related indicators and targets in the logical framework. For example, one indicator was on the number of female and male individuals that were trained and engaged in awareness-raising activities. And then coming to implementation of the project, Argentina implemented various projects, various activities, to analyze how exposure to mercury is different based on gender and how to manage these disparities. And the project did a consultation with health organizations and developed a report called Mercury and Gender Issues. It's in Spanish and highlighted how biological diversities and also social factors, including job and household responsibilities, influence the way men and women and also children are exposed to mercury in Argentina. And also analyzing how these different different responsibilities and social factors result in impacts on the health of women, men, and children. The report, this report, Mercury and Gender Issues, provided some very good information on the mercury exposure, especially in the healthcare sector, and the related gender issues, and concluded that the coordination with key actors is crucial in Argentina to identify the population that are potentially more at risk. And this is to design public policies that would protect them. And another conclusion of this report is that a number of actions are needed to advance public policies that provide women and pregnant women with the necessary care and support to avoid dental restoration using mercury dental amalgam. Now, moving to the second project that we have identified as a case study. You can see it on the slide. It's the SIP project in Armenia. It is also a project from the SIP first round, and it's titled Strengthening Capacity to Promote Phasing Out of Mercury Added Products, in particular focusing on lamps. The project was implemented by the Ministry of Nature Protection of Armenia between June 2019 and November 2021, with a total SIP project budget of $162,000 US dollars. And the project aimed at strengthening the capacities to promote the phase out of mercury added products, in particular lamps in Armenia. And this was done by reviewing and analyzing the existing legislative framework and by preparing new legislation to avoid the use of these products. The project also supported some work to identify the streams of mercury-added products, in particular lamps, again, including studying the import, distribution, use, and amounts of wastes generated per year. And this was done to prepare a strategy for the sound collection, storage, transportation, and processing of mercury waste lamps. Gender considerations were discussed in some detail at the project design stage, because Armenia indicated in the project proposal that the engagement of women would be promoted, especially in decision-making processes, but also at the national and global levels. And very importantly, Armenia involved a non-governmental organization, an NGO, called Armenian Women for Health and Healthy Environment, which was involved as the main project partner. And during implementation, the implementation of some of the activities were carried out in close cooperation with this NGO. For example, the the Ministry of Environment and the NGO carried out a survey to identify the quantity and also the type of mercury added lamps in 13 cities in 9 provinces of Armenia. Then they carried out a study in stores and that focus on the distribution of mercury-free and mercury-added lamps, as well as on the analysis of the labeling of these products. Then the project also developed 2 leaflets about the risks linked to mercury-added lamps. And lastly, it developed and organized awareness-raising online seminars and workshops focusing on mercury-added lamps and targeting especially vulnerable groups. The third project we have identified as a case study, and it's presented in the report that will be available on the website of the Minamata Convention soon, is the project in the Republic of Moldova. This is a project from the second round of the SIP, and the title is Support to Post-Ratification of the Minamata Convention to the Republic of Moldova by building phase-down capacity, and reducing the risks associated with mercury. So this project was implemented by the Minister of Environment of the Republic of Moldova between September 2020 and September 2023. And the total SIP budget was $219,765 US. This project in particular focused on mercury added products and had activities aimed at reducing the mercury releases from the use of mercury added products by gradually phasing them out. Another activity was on elaboration of a legislative framework that regulates the management of mercury and mercury wastes. Then the project also worked towards improving the knowledge and building capacity for the environmentally sound interim storage of mercury, and conducted some awareness raising activities with the objective of reducing mercury exposure. And this was particularly among women and children. So gender elements were included at the project design stage because the logical framework of the project, which was submitted with the proposal, included a gender-related output. This was output 3 on the exposure to mercury-containing products, particularly among women and children, to be reduced. And also the Republic of Moldova developed a specific indicator that would help to monitor and assess the implementation of this output throughout the project implementation. Then additionally, this project also identified some healthcare facilities that used mercury-added products in the Republic of Moldova, and these were mainly medical devices. And in doing this identification of healthcare facilities, Moldova paid close attention to medical institutions that are visited mainly by pregnant women, mothers, and children. In the final reporting, both in the interim and in the final reporting, actually, Moldova included some gender disaggregated data regarding the participation of women and men in various project activities, which was very useful for the Secretariat to also monitor the implementation of the project through a gender lens, and highlighted that women were particularly included as steering committee members and also in study visits that were organized during the project and also in training sessions. So these were the 3 case studies that were identified by the Secretariat and presented in the report. Now we would like to take a little step back and look at how the SIP program, the Specific International Program, contains arrangements and requirements on gender. And in particular, I would like to highlight the application guidelines for the 4th round of applications to the SIP. These are the last version of the application guidelines that were developed by the Secretariat to support applicants in submitting SIP projects. And these guidelines provide specific information on how to develop a project proposal that includes information on gender, and in particular, this is because gender mainstreaming is a required element in project applications. So there is a specific section on gender in the project application form, and also the applications submitted for SIP funding need to explain how the design, but also the implementation, the monitoring, and the evaluation of the projects will address gender considerations. In addition to being one of the elements to be included in the project application, gender is also one of the appraisal criteria that is used by the SIP governing board to decide on the projects to be approved in each application round. And therefore, when applicants submit project proposals to the secretariat and for their review and later for their appraisal in view of the SIP governing board meeting, we really recommend applicants to include some gender activities, but also indicators and targets in their logical frameworks. And example of activities that can be included in project applications are activities that aim at generating gender disaggregated data, also planning and organizing awareness raising activities on gender differentiated impacts of Mercury management. Another activity could be about promotion of multi-stakeholder approaches that ensure gender effective participation. So effective participation of different groups that could be women and also youth in policy development and decision making. Another activity could be about creating terms of reference for project staff that ensures equal opportunity for men and women. And then also some activities could be included at the monitoring and evaluation stage, taking also into account feedback among women and men during project implementation. So I've now been talking about submission of project proposal for SIP funding, but let's now jump right to project closing procedures. Because when we close SIP projects, we request either the governments to conduct a terminal review or the Secretariat engages a consultant to conduct a terminal evaluation. For both the terminal review and the terminal evaluation, we have prepared guidelines, and both the guidelines for conducting terminal review and terminal evaluations include a section on gender strategies that request to describe how the project implemented its gender strategies. So moving to the next slide. This is about this slide wants to give you some information on the events that the Secretariat has organized in the past years regarding gender elements in the SIP, but not only in the SIP. At COP5 in November 2023, the Secretariat held a knowledge lab which was titled Mainstreaming Gender in Capacity Building Projects, Practical Approaches. And that knowledge lab showcased how gender consideration have been integrated in projects funded by the specific international program, so by the SIP, by the Global Environment Facility, the GEF, and the special program. This session was live, so we didn't record it. It was live at COP5, but we repeated the same session last year as part of Minamata Online Season 4 on the occasion of International Women's Day. And there's a link if you wish to check the recording and the presentation. Also in 2022, as part of Minamata Online Season 2, the Secretariat held a session titled Promoting Gender Equality in the Implementation of the Convention. And for this one too, there's a link and you can watch again the recording of the session. And lastly, I would like to mention that the Secretariat also organized a session on gender during the training course for co-chairs organized by the BRS conventions in February this year. And with that, I can hand over to Lara for the rest of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Irene. So I would like to take you through the next priority activity, which is the measurement of meaningful participation of women in meetings of the Conference of the Parties, in bureau meetings, and in other official and expert meetings, which was one of the priority activities identified for the Secretariat for this biennium, and with the correlated activity for parties to ensure that there was gender balance in their delegations. So we reviewed the numbers of COP5. This is what we found. So out of the 437 delegates that attended, government delegates that attended COP5, we see 46% were women and 43% were men, and 11% didn't. Was not information was not available. To explain to you, we take the information that is provided by participants in their registration form, and sometimes participants have not identified a gender, so we were not able to establish the percentage for those who didn't mention information on gender. But out of those we could, which is the vast majority, we see a certain balance in representation by women and men when it comes to delegates attending COP5. However, if we look at the heads of delegation, which were in total 55 heads of delegations who attended COP5, we see there was a predominance of men. 53% were men against 22% women. And again, 25% did not disclose the information as they registered. When it comes to COP5 observers, out of a total number of 235 participants, we have 42% women and 45% men, which is again pretty balanced. When it comes to participation in COP contact groups and co-chairs of contact groups, we see overall across COPs also some balance. We have 40% were women and 60% were men when it comes to chairs of contact groups of COPs so far. When it comes to membership to the bureau, the current bureau, the COP6 bureau, we see a 50-50 representation, men and women. For the Implementation and Compliance Committee, which is an advisory body to the COP, we see 60% women, 40% men. For the SIP Governing Board, we see a 50-50 representation as well. And when it comes to the open-ended scientific group on effective evaluation, for example, we see a predominance of men, 68% versus 32% of women. This gives you an overview of the status now, and then, of course, the Secretary will continue monitoring participation of women, in particular, meaningful participation of women at the next COP and also at other meetings. So here are the two remaining priority activities out of the list. We have one activity where we haven't registered much progress so far, which is the identification of champions. So a promotion of efforts to identify champions to support the Secretariat in its endeavor to mainstream gender into all activities to be undertaken by itself, by parties, and by other stakeholders. So this is activities still in progress, and we are looking into possibilities of further implementing this activity, this biennium, but also in the next biennium. And maybe I will come back to this later on when we open the discussion on what we could do during the next intersessional period. Here, for example, one option will be to establish a gender caucus at the COP, following the CBD example. And then another activity, a priority activity, relates to effectiveness evaluation process. So this is a priority activity for parties to ensure that gender disaggregated data is included in the effectiveness evaluation process under Article 22. In particular, with monitoring with respect to the monitoring of data on trends in the levels of mercury and mercury compounds observed in biotic media and vulnerable populations. So in line with this activity, priority activity identified by COP5, the Secretariat is continuing its efforts so that gender disaggregated data is included in the effectiveness evaluation process that will be completed at COP7. In particular, the open-ended scientific group will review the data on the levels of mercury in vulnerable populations disaggregated by gender at its second meeting from 17 to 21st of March this year. And this concludes our overview of what we've been doing so far to implement the Gender Action Plan. And we would like to provide some initial considerations on possible priority areas for the next biennium, also based on how we can continue in working on the priority for this biennium and carry the results over into the next as a first step. And then also we may identify new areas of work and new priority activities to be included in our program of work for the next biennium. So in terms of collection of gender disaggregated data, we could continue our efforts with respect to national reporting. For example, we could integrate guidance on how to report on gender in the guidance on completing the national report. That is, it's a support offered by the Secretariat, and it's a guidance that is available to all parties as they implement their obligation under Article 21 to report on implementation of the Convention. And also we could include gender consideration in the Secretariat's training on national reporting that is aimed at supporting parties in filling in the national report throughout the cycles, the reporting cycles. When it comes to the specific international program, we could consider adding the invitation for project partners to add gender disaggregated data in their periodic reporting on the implementation of their projects as partners. So parties who have receiving grants under the SIP are to report every 6 months on the implementation of their projects. And so gender disaggregated data could be included as a section, for example, in their interim reports and final reports as they report on the implementation of their projects. Also, in the SIP dashboard, we could present information about the inclusion of gender elements in SIP project. This is a dashboard that provides a variety of information on existing projects approved under the SIP. And also, we would like to possibly prepare some communication material around the SIP case studies that you've heard earlier on presented by Irene. We're still in the development, we're at the end of developing these case studies. They will soon be available on our website. So I've seen a comment by Florian on this. So please bear with us, but they will be available soon, of course, in preparation for COP6. And also we'll be planning some communication material around these case studies, hopefully also in the next biennium. And then other possible initial considerations of how we can continue working on implementing the Gender Action Plan. I mentioned earlier this review of national action plans as establishing a baseline for what we could do under the review, or what parties could do to, if not report on existing gender elements of their NAPs, how to integrate gender in their review of their national action plan. So this work should be or could be carried out in the next intersessional period as we support parties in preparing their review of of implementation of Article 7 and national action plans on SGM. Also, we can continue efforts so that gender disaggregated data is included in the effectiveness evaluation process that will be completed at COP7. And finally, we could, further our efforts in identifying champions for gender, and we could look into experiences from other MEAs, like the Convention on Biological Diversity that has established a caucus for women's caucus, which is a self-organized global platform and a coalition of community-based organizations and civil society organizations advocating for and contributing to the implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And this ties to one possible new area of work under the Gender Action Plan, which is widening constituencies. And in line with this area of work, we could look into building new partnership with, for example, other relevant MEAs like the Convention on Biological Diversity to promote engagement of women and awareness raising on the effects of mercury exposure on women, as there is a wealth of information and experiences in other fora, in particular the CBD, and we could further work on creating linkages and through joint side events so that that information also can feed into the Minamata processes and vice versa. So this is some food for thoughts and some initial considerations. I would just like to conclude because before we open the Q&A with the last slide. This is on our upcoming COP6. So in preparation for COP6, the Secretariat will prepare a working document on the state of implementation of the Gender Action Plan and also on priority activities, and also will include some possible priority activities for the 2026-2027 biennium for consideration at COP6, which is scheduled to take place from 3rd to 7th November this year in Geneva. So I will stop here for now, and here this slide just provides you with some links to additional resources developed by the Secretariat on gender and mercury. You see here some links, and the presentation will be made available on our website, so you will have access to all this information. And of course, for more information on gender and mercury, we have a dedicated web page on our website. Here's the link on gender and mercury. So I will stop here, and we'll check if there's any question in the chat. But in the meantime, as I look at the chat, I will just give the floor to my colleague Richard, who had some further information on the earlier question on cosmetics. Maybe you could elaborate on that as a to start, and then I will look through your comments.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Lara. Yes, there was a question in the chat earlier from Elena Limberidi Settimo. The question was, she was asking, I mentioned cosmetics, but it doesn't appear in the slide. So it seems that parties have not linked cosmetics with gender or women, or they are not reporting on cosmetics at all. I just wanted to provide some further clarity on that. I provided Elena a response in the chat. And again, thank you also, Elena, for that observation. First is that the cosmetics was mentioned in the required action, wherein there should be a review according to gender considerations of national reports, et cetera, et cetera. And then it mentions cosmetics. In the slide that I showed, I mentioned that in our preliminary findings, the reporting on gender seems to be around the issues of dental amalgam, on advisories on mercury in fish and seafood, information campaigns on health risks, and scientific studies on exposure and risk in ASGM. Now, this is just a preliminary finding on our review of the national reports. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. And this is with regard to Elena's question on whether parties are not reporting on this or they're not making any links. At least from our preliminary findings, we cannot arrive at that conclusion at this point. First, as you will note from the trend in the reporting, parties respond when there's a specific question in the reporting format. So you can see the number of responses picking up in the first full national report and then sort of ebbing in the second short national report. So this is to say that we cannot make any conclusions on whether parties are reporting or not, or making a relation with women or gender on the issue of cosmetics. So this is primarily a function of the questions in the reporting format. Second, we're still undergoing the external link check of all the reports. So we're still in progress of doing that. So that might reveal other information down the line. And then lastly, I was remiss in mentioning that in terms of gender distribution for national focal points at the national reports, at least for the national focal point in the national reporting process, we do have 52.7% women national focal points and 47.3% male national focal points for the Minamata Convention. So I hope, Elena, that was helpful. And then also my apologies to everyone. I wasn't able to include this data point in my presentation earlier. Back to you, Lara. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. I believe we have addressed the comments in the chat box, but please go ahead and let me know if there's anything that remains unanswered in the chat box, or if you'd like to raise a point. We still have a few minutes, and we'll be happy to take a few additional comments, if any. If not, then I thank you very much for joining this webinar. And let me assure you that the link to the recording of this session, as well as the material and the presentation, will be soon made available on our website. Thank you very much, and have a great day.